Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Overtime Podcast, a Cold Front Report multicast. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Clayton Garrett. You can find me on Twitter at CFR Clayton. Joining me, as always,
my name is Jeff Uvino. You can find me on Twitter at RealJUVEINO.
Jeff, it was probably, I understand we have a little unfinished business to get to since we missed a week of recording because of the election. I know you had media obligations with the election, so for those of you that were wondering why we're ghosting that last week, that was why. It just didn't work out too well last week with our schedules. So it is what it is, but we're picking the ball back up and we're getting it rolling this week. And what an exciting game we're left to talk about with this 44-33 victory over the Seattle Seahawks. So what were your initial thoughts coming out of this game, given your expectations? I don't know what your expectations were going into this game. So what were you feeling going into the game, and how were you feeling coming out?
Yeah, well, first of all, last week the news cycle was, it's a once every 4-year news cycle. It was very busy, and so the game to cap off the week on Sunday was a really nice treat. And I guess going into the game, I've said this throughout the season that I don't mind the Bills being in shootouts with teams, no matter who it is, and they kind of reassured that for me this week, winning a game that 78 points were scored and a signature performance. Let's call it what it is. A signature performance in the regular season for the Bills. I mean, the defense, despite giving up 30-plus points, 4 huge turnovers that set the offense up, and a great day for Josh Allen. Dare I say, mistake-free. Just a tremendous performance and exactly what Buffalo needed to get back on track.
Yeah, this is, you kind of alluded to it being a statement victory. Going to this game, I had actually predicted the Bills to lose. I was on the roundtable on #Sports YouTube channel last week, and I had predicted the Bills to lose 37-23, and then I predicted the same exact score on the Saturday night tailgate with Mookie Hopkins and Mario Cardano of #Sports. So I wasn't really expecting even a victory. And my whole thought process was the 2 games where they had to play Super Bowl contenders, those games against the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs. I could not pragmatically predict that the Bills were going to win this football game, bad defense on the Seahawks team or not. What I didn't predict, however, or expect, I should say, was the resurgence of this Bills defense. And you touched on it, how they still allowed 33 points. They still allowed over 300 yards passing. But I think the biggest thing was getting a leg up in this football game, not only forcing those 4 turnovers, but forcing Seattle to have to be aggressive, forcing them to have to be one-dimensional. I understand they were missing both Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde coming into this football game, but I feel like the defense's ability to stop a one-dimensional attack for the Seattle Seahawks offense, and I understand they're primarily a passing attack, but not having a running game or not existing in that facet does affect your offense and your ability to flow throughout the course of a game. So the defense, I felt, they stepped up big time. I understand statistically it's comparable to other performances, and we've harped on this defense for a while, and it's weird to come out of this game saying this is their best performance, but those 4 turnovers, those 5 sacks, the 16 quarterback hits, all of those accumulating in the same performance, that's really what led to that Russell Wilson-led offense being just ultimately shut down in this game and making this game a very convincing win for the Bills.
Yeah, and that's why we talk all the time about getting off to good starts and getting ahead in the game, because it's hard to play from behind in the NFL no matter who you're playing. And the Bills offense was just clicking. I mean, receivers were open for the entirety of the game. Allen had a great day, but Brian Daboll made it a little easier on him as well, because they were setting up screens and getting 2 or 3 linemen 10 yards downfield with the back behind them. They were able to throw the ball all over the Seahawks secondary with ease, and they jumped on the Seahawks at the beginning of the game, and it made it really tough for Russell Wilson, as great as he is, to play from behind and be able to make up for that deficit.
Yeah, that Bills defensive line was allowed to just pin their ears back and rush. But we're going to talk about the defense here in a minute. But I want to talk about the offense, because you kind of alluded to Brian Daboll having a solid day as a play caller. The Bills offense in totality having probably one of their best outputs this season, with Allen eclipsing 400 yards passing for just the second time in his career, the second time this season, eclipsing 300 yards passing for the 5th time this season. And, John Brown and Stephon Diggs combining for what's been their best day as a duo, going over 200 yards receiving combined. This was a solid day for the Bills offense from front to back, from start to finish. I thought this was an excellent game plan by Brian Daboll. And actually, I forget who, but one of the players in post-game press conferences had actually revealed that they had planned a balanced approach going into this game. And they really just rode with the passing game because of the hot hand and because of how well it was working for this offense. Because this offense, you touched on it on the onset, they didn't skip a beat at all in this game. It felt like they were in control from the minute they stepped on the field, and it felt like they were going. The game was in their hands essentially. And this was a really bad defense, but this was also a game where I felt like this is a game where that we all needed to see, because like I said, in my expectations of the Bills losing this game, it was because of how they looked against two other Super Bowl contenders. I understand the Seattle Seahawks are a different beast from both the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs, but it proved a lot to me that this team has the potential to be a real contender, that they have the ability to compete with high caliber, high quality football teams such as the Seattle Seahawks. And, that leaves me with a lot of optimism here in the second half of the season, because to say that they're going up a notch in quality of competition would be an understatement. But beating the Seahawks is definitely a good start, considering some of the teams that you're going to have to wrap up the 2020 season with. The Arizona Cardinals are no slouch, but not really teams of that variety, more so the Pittsburgh Steelers, teams like that. And you're going to need to have a solid second half of the season. And I think beating the Seahawks is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and it was right from the opening kickoff. Andre Roberts takes the opening kickoff of the game, runs it past midfield. Here we go. And then the Buffalo offense runs it right down their throats, or throws it right down their throats, I should say. And I agree with you that I thought Brian Daboll had a great game plan. And even if he was coming in thinking that they were going to have that balanced attack, you didn't need it after the way they were able to throw the ball. And we knew that Seattle had the 32nd ranked pass defense in the league coming into this game dead last. And they took advantage of that. This was a game where we thought we were going to see a lot of fireworks through the air on both sides of the ball. And while we did, it was a lot more evident on the Bills side. And also something important to note from this one, Russell Wilson turned the ball over 4 times. Josh Allen turned it over 0. And I understand that the Bills kind of built that lead late in the game to where, when the Patriots, when the Seahawks scored that touchdown to make it, was a 38 or 41-27, they're down, they were down a bit, and you think, okay, this game's over, and they get those 2 scores. You call that garbage time, whatever. But if Russell Wilson hadn't turned the ball over there late in the game, they could have gotten back into it. You never know. And so Allen not turning the ball over and not giving the Seattle offense short fields like Seattle did to Buffalo, I think was really key in this game, because you give your defense a chance, at least by making Seattle go the length of the field. I mean, was it 2 of the 4 turnovers the Bills took over in the red zone? Correct me if I'm wrong. The Trey White pick he brought down almost to the goal line. That's huge. That's huge, especially when your offense is having that good of a day. You're going to give them starting field position in the red zone. It's a pretty tall task to ask of the Seattle defense.
Well, really, this was the first time this season. Well, I can't really say it's the first time this season, but with the defense rolling at all cylinders like they were in this game, that's what gives me the inclination to say this was really the first time this season that you've seen this Bills team play complementary football through all 3 phases of the game. The special teams has been there. The offense has been there. The defense just hasn't been there yet this season. And just like Truth to Heart says in the comments, it was a 41-20 game with 8 minutes left in the game. Our defense shut them down. We just gave up a lot of garbage time yards and points. I tend to agree with that. And the defense did do an incredible job. And that's really what opened this game up for this offense to take the field. They jumped out to a 17-point lead. And, we talk every week about how it's so important to get to a 2-possession lead in this league. And that's really where things can start off, especially for a team that's built like the Bills on the defensive side of the ball. But Josh Allen, we've been talking about it here and there, just touching on it. So now I want to focus on it. After the first month of this season, I was really on the train of him being an MVP candidate for the 2020 season. And the following 3 games, you didn't really see him playing to the quality that he was playing in the first month of the season. And then, he comes out there against the Seattle Seahawks and he lights them up for over 80% completion percentage, having over 400 yards passing, 3 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. Jeff, do you think this honestly puts Josh Allen's hat back in the MVP conversation?
Well, he needs to keep doing it. He needs to keep doing it for the next however many weeks, because he looked like an MVP candidate on Sunday. He looked like he did in September on Sunday. And now he just needs to keep that momentum going. I mean, I wouldn't say Josh has had any horrible games this year. He's struggled at some points. Really struggled in the Kansas City game to move the ball. Same in the Tennessee game. But I wouldn't say those games were disasters by any stretch of the imagination. He had just been playing so well those first 4 weeks that it was, a step back was almost inevitable. And I don't know if he's a streaky player. I don't know if he's has that much experience under his belt to where we can define whether he is or not. But if he continues to play like this the rest of the way, then absolutely he's in the top 3 of the MVP voting. I mean, 400 yards is a tall task of a quarterback. I mean, how often does that happen in the league? Those are Breeze numbers, those are Rodgers numbers, and those are Mahomes numbers. And now, could we begin saying that those are Josh Allen numbers?
That's what I'm curious to know as well, because the start of the year was, okay, can we just get one performance like that from Josh Allen? And then, that turned into a whole month of those performances for Josh Allen. And, we were seeing that on a consistent basis at that point. You saw it for every single week for a month. And then it kind of tapered off against the Titans, where you saw a little bit of a lack of execution, as well as against the Chiefs, where you saw it rainy. I think that was one thing in this game that impacted the Bills' offense, or at least benefited the Bills' offense a lot more than all of us really gave it credit for, was the fact that this was a 70-degree day a week into November in the city of Buffalo. That is incredible to have that kind of weather. I mean, it's still going on this week. It was like 80 degrees yesterday and it was 75 today around noon. So it's not like this good weather has gone away just yet. But the point being, I feel like every single game the Bills have had to play in Buffalo has been crappy weather. It's always been rain and wind and all these things that affect the offense. That's not me excusing the Bills' inability to execute in those certain games where there was inclement weather, but I feel like it definitely helped the Bills out in this game. The fact that they could just go out there and play their game, they didn't have to worry about any other exterior factors. But with Josh Allen in this game, I really feel like this was, if he's going to be in that MVP conversation come the end of the season, like you said, if he can be consistent with it this in the latter half of the season, like he was in the first quarter of the season, I should say, I think he's definitely got a shot at being in the conversation, or maybe even end up being the MVP of the league if the Bills can make a run here and finish with 13 or maybe even 14 wins. That'd be insane. But if that were the case, you certainly cannot rule it out. You look at how he executed this game. You said it at the onset. As borderline to a flawless game as you can get. Josh Allen played out of his mind in this game. And, the point being, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves with this MVP talk like we may have at the beginning of the season when he was really on a tear there. But the point is that Josh Allen played the way he was supposed to play in this game if the Bills were going to come away with a victory. And I think that is the thing not enough of us are talking about, because this was a game that I was concerned with Josh Allen going out there and looking like a deer in the headlights. Given that he's playing against another MVP caliber quarterback, given the fact that he's playing, this really was a huge game on the Bills' schedule, one that I was not expecting to be a victory by any means, but definitely a statement game, a game that says a lot about this football team to a lot of people. It was really a prove-it performance for not only the Buffalo Bills in their entirety, but also the Bills' young quarterback, finding that success that he had in the early stages of the season.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. If the weather becomes a narrative, that's bad news for Buffalo. I don't know that it is, but if you're calling Josh Allen a fair weather quarterback, That's bad news if you're playing in Buffalo, because we know what the conditions are going to be come playoff time. And frankly, the majority of the weeks. Now, I don't think that that's what it is. I don't think that the weather, I don't think we can label Josh Allen as a fair weather quarterback, because I know that he was dealing with the injury the last couple of weeks. And I think that that's probably more to blame for his lack of production than the weather. But hey, we get a picture perfect day in Buffalo and Allen goes off. Is that going to be the narrative from now on? Is that Josh Allen only plays well in good weather? Because if so, that's not what you want. Of all cities to have that in, Buffalo is not the one. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but if that becomes a trend going forward, then you got to be apprehensive about that if you're the Bills.
Yeah, I hope it's not, but at the same time, I really just hope they get a dome. They either get a dome or the retractable roof. I really don't care. I'm sick of the Bills having these crappy weather games. I understand you don't want him to be a fair weather quarterback, and you don't want the weather to be a narrative. And Jason Morello in the comments tends to agree. I think it was Josh's injury and was never the weather. Let's talk about that for a second, because we saw the shoulder brace that he had been wearing since the Titans game come off in this game, and that's really where you saw him have that free mobility, have that free range of motion, and he was really able to execute. Do I think that played a factor into this game? Absolutely. I think, any player Jeff, did you ever have to wear a brace in any of the sports you played?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll have the purpose of a brace. It's so that you cannot move the area that you hurt, so that you don't further injure yourself. And it sucks. It is awful. I know as a lineman, having to move your arms and having to have full extension of your arms, it was incredibly difficult wearing a shoulder brace. And I understand, it's not necessarily the same thing being a quarterback throwing with your right arm and having one on your left shoulder. I understand it might not be the exact same thing, but to some degree, that will always prohibit some of your range of motion. So I could see how that'd be uncomfortable. I'm not going to sit here and say that Josh Allen's a completely different player with and without his shoulder brace, but statistically speaking, I think we can start that argument. But no, I think it's time for the Bills to get a dome. I think when they get a new stadium, that's going to be a dome. I'd be so excited if that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. The stadium thing. I love the Ralph. I mean, it's glorious in my opinion. The whole situation being out in a rural area and with the tailgating scene and everything, I think it's fine the way it is. However, if you have a quarterback, your franchise quarterback, who can't throw the ball well in snow, that becomes a problem. Now, the Jets game, obviously, it was the wind that was the main problem for Allen and for both teams. You just couldn't throw the ball down the field. It just wasn't plausible because of the wind. And if you have a dome, that is taken away, obviously. But, we're talking about right now, we're talking about this season, and we're in Bills Stadium this season either way. And I don't know, until Josh Allen comes out and he has a performance like this and kind of a crappy weather game. I understand your game plan's different and everything, but until that happens, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want that to become a narrative if you're a Bills fan, because it's bad news. I mean, maybe if you're playing in Los Angeles, it's okay that you only play well in bad weather, but not in Buffalo in January. But regardless, you said it perfectly when you said that Allen did what he needed to do against this team. And I think that's what he's done for the majority of the season. And let me tell you what, this Bills team had better be damn glad that Allen's progressed as much from last year to this as he has, because defense has been bad compared to last year. I mean, the Bills were winning games last year because of their defense. That's indisputable. And this year, they're winning games because of their quarterback and because of the playmakers they have on offense, which was kind of a complete 180 that we didn't really see coming. However, I think that the Seahawks game was a step forward for the Bills defense with the 4 turnovers, regardless of how many yards they gave up, regardless of how many points they give up. They gave up some big plays, but you got to remember, you're playing one of the best players in the league in Russell Wilson, who has a ton of playmakers, and you forced 4 turnovers. Not only did you pick Russell Wilson off twice, you made him fumble twice. And that's a huge step in the right direction for a defense that if they can get right, as we like to say, and Allen continues to play how he has, the potential for the Bills is endless. However, you need both of those things to happen on any given week if you're going to beat teams like the Chiefs, like the Steelers, and like the Titans.
This was the best scoring offense in the league coming into this game, I believe, with the Seattle Seahawks. And to see this defense perform the way they did, to see them step up the way they did, I thought both schematically and in execution, it was an excellent game on the Bills' defensive side of the ball. It was a great, Leslie Frazier did an incredible job with his game plan for this game. And I really liked a lot of the things they were doing with fronts. We actually had former Seattle Seahawks running back Robert Turbin on the Saturday night tailgate with Mookie Hawkins and Mario Granada and myself. And one of the things that Rob had highlighted for us that the Seattle Seahawks offense struggles with is double A gap looks. And, when I say double A gap looks, the first thought to Bills Mafia and their thought process is when the Bills bring Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmunds both into the A gap with their regular defensive line with Quentin Jefferson and Oliver both in 3 technique looks. They haven't ran that look all that much this season. They haven't ran it nearly as much as they did in the second half of the last season. You've seen it as just a handful of times, but instead of running a look that you have seen that the Bills have put on film plenty of times, what they were doing was they were bringing both their D tackles in at 1 technique in the A gaps, and they were lining up their defensive ends in 4 eyes, and they brought Tremaine Edmonds down onto the edge of the line of scrimmage and had A.J. Klein in the middle. And my goodness, A.J. Klein, I've got a plate of crow to eat this week, Jeff. A.J. Klein just decided to have his career performance. One of those forced fumbles was coming from a sack received by A.J. Klein. And A.J. Klein, man, he went off in this game. I think we definitely found out what the strength of A.J. Klein as a football player is in this game, because without a doubt, this is definitely the best performance that you've seen from A.J. Klein in a Bills uniform. The bar wasn't really high going into the game, but this guy was an animal. He was moving forward. He was executing rather than just reacting. Other times it looked like his feet were really slow. It looked like his reads were really slow. And in this game, when he was moving forward, he was doing a great job. He was often tasked, like I had mentioned, in the middle of the field, sometimes spying Russell Wilson. And when the Bills were manufacturing pressure there, they were manufacturing pressure throughout the entirety of the game in situations. And I thought they did an incredible job of that. They picked their chances at the correct times. Russell Wilson had scored 2 touchdowns off of blitzes, but it was working throughout the duration of the game more times than not. That's really what led to the 4 turnovers, is the pressure that this Bills defense was manufacturing and getting on Russell Wilson. I thought it was an incredible job for the front 7 of the Bills defense.
Yeah, Klein had a couple really nice blitzes, and I think the linebacking core as a whole played really well in this one. Another player who I've kind of harped on some this year that he needs to improve, and he did this week, that's Tremaine Edmonds. He had himself a really nice game. I've talked in the past on this show about Edmonds not filling gaps, or when he does fill gaps, not making tackles, and he did both of those things against the Seahawks, and I think he was good in pass coverage too. And, we've said Edmonds being your anchor in the middle of that defense. Is that right for him, or should he be moved to outside linebacker? I think the way he played against the Seahawks, he showed that he can play that middle linebacker position. He can be your field general in the middle of your defense. And hopefully he's past that injury that had been lingering in the beginning of the season. Hopefully he's done with that, and now he can continue to move forward, because you need him. And I think the linebacking core really made a difference, especially forcing those turnovers. Linebackers play such a huge role in coverage. They can, as you and I both know, having played the game ourselves, linebackers can really help out your secondary, and I think that they did for the Bills against the Seahawks.
And in this defense specifically, they are such a big factor in both coverage and in run defense. And this is really the first game this season that you and I can both sit here and agree that the linebackers definitely made a difference in this game. And you touched on Tremaine Edmonds, and I cannot mention A.J. Klein without mentioning the improvement from Tremaine Edmonds in this game. I'm of the belief that was really the difference of this Bills defense, was the performance of Tremaine Edmonds. Obviously, A.J. Klein played out of his mind in this game, and it definitely helped the Bills out. But having that anchor in the middle of the field for what felt like the first time this season, because this game, it felt like Tremaine Edmonds played the way we had expected him to play coming into this year. And the one thing about this Bills regime, from Brian Dable to Sean McDermott to Leslie Frazier, is they'll never use a lapse in execution or a lapse in execution and use an injury as an excuse for that lapse in execution by their players. But they will tell you when they're definitively healthy. We've kind of beaten around the bush with Tremaine for the last 2-3 weeks, ever since, the waters have kind of cleared with that shoulder injury. That was another player in this game. You saw the shoulder brace come off. And you saw Tremaine Edmonds go off. It was a great game for Tremaine Edmonds. He was decisive in his reads. He was decisive in his steps. He looked quiet. Wow. He looked quick. He looked fast. He was playing fast and physical throughout this game. And that's such a big thing for this Bills defense, to have an effective middle linebacker. And Tremaine Edmonds, he had a standout game. I feel like this was the comeback performance that he needed to get back on track and hopefully have a solid latter half of the season.
Yeah, and I think that this defensive performance, it was kind of the perfect storm for their confidence and for them getting back on track, because no, they didn't come out and shut down Russell Wilson completely. He still threw the ball a lot. They scored 34 points, regardless of when they got them, regardless of how they got them. They were over 30 and they were over 20. If you want to consider anything after that garbage point, they still scored 20 points. But they got the 4 turnovers. And I think that that's something you can really rally around and build off of and say, okay, even if we're giving up these points like we made to more good offenses, you're playing another great offense in Arizona this coming week, we're giving up yards. We can still force those timely turnovers because they did it to beat the Patriots. A timely turnover is what won that Patriots game. And then you get 4 more this week to set up your offense. And if the identity of the Bills defense becomes forcing timely turnovers, hey, that's not a bad thing to have to go with your high-powered offense.
Well, the one thing, because they have had an opportunistic defense throughout the duration of Sean McDermott's tenure. They have. It's just they haven't had the opportunistic offense to pair with that. And we saw on Sunday how lethal that is when you have your defense causing turnovers and you have a high-powered offense to take the field. That this offense is going to get their points regardless of how many possessions they have in a game. So if you're giving them more possessions and you're taking away possessions from the other team, that is a losing recipe for almost any team that has to cross the Bills this season, for almost any team that has to play anybody this season. Getting turnovers and forcing turnovers or even turning the ball over is such a huge factor in football. And when you do it, and when turnovers come in bunches, that's how you see such convincing performances like you saw this past week. Another thing I wanted to talk about before we get into studs and duds. How did you feel Trey White played in this game?
That's a tough question. I mean, he had the pick, but I think that you can only do so much against DK Metcalf. The deep ball to Metcalf trade kind of had him blanketed. It was just a perfect ball. But I feel like that's kind of a trend that we've been saying this year. Oh, Trey got beat, but it was a perfect ball. Should he be getting beat no matter what? I mean, can that be an excuse if it keeps happening for us?
I will say this. I feel like you and I kind of have a different vibe about Trey White coming out of this game, and I like it because I felt like he played really good against DK Metcalf. I'm extremely high on DK Metcalf. This is a guy that coming out of the draft, I did not want the Bills to even sniff at DK Metcalf. I wanted Ed Oliver all the way. But, in the second round, I was definitely saying, the Bills should definitely draft DK Metcalf. They didn't, and they traded up and drafted Cody Ford. But that's beside the point. DK Metcalf is an extraordinary talent with his size and speed, and he's learned how to run routes crisper than I had expected him to coming out of college. I think DK Metcalf is going to be, by the end of next year, he's going to be one of the 3 best wide receivers in football, almost consensusly. The 60 yards, 63 yards, I believe he had on Trey White in coverage. First of all, I was surprised to see Trey White shadowing him in this game because Trey normally doesn't really shadow guys. He normally doesn't blanket guys. And to see him on DK Metcalf almost exclusively in this game from start to finish, that was a statement to me. I felt like, and given the fact that he only had 63 yards receiving, obviously the big PI penalty that had led to the deep connection with DK and ultimately a Seattle Seahawks touchdown. That's kind of ticky tacky. Some people will call that DPI, some people won't. But it is what it is. The fact that he contained DK Metcalf to what he had contained him to, I felt that was very promising. And I wouldn't, not necessarily promising, maybe that isn't the right word for it, but I was okay with that performance. Trey undercut a route and he forced the turnover. He forced the issue later in the game, and he made an aggressive play that went his way. You saw him get beat on a deep ball by a guy who's just, how many guys have been able to cover DK Metcalf this year on those deep balls? DK Metcalf is an extraordinary talent. He's incredible with his size and speed. And I was grateful that the Bills were able to keep him to 63 yards in this game. Not for my fantasy team. I did end up winning anyways. But DK, I felt the Bills did a good job against DK Metcalf. I don't think you could have asked for much more in this game for the Bills secondary going up against DK Metcalf.
Well, and I think that the secondary was also aided by the pressure that the Bills were able to get on the quarterback. And also, like I said, the linebackers being effective both in run stopping and in coverage. I think that helped the safeties a lot too. I thought that, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, I thought they both had good games, but I think that they were aided by the front seven. And that's something that the Bills have been missing so far this season. As we've talked about it every single week. They've had no pass rush at all. I thought that they stepped up more this week, and we talked about the improved linebacker play. But for Trey White, he's going to be – we'll see how he does against DeAndre Hopkins this upcoming week. The Cardinals have a great receiving corps, so, you mentioned that they had him blanket Metcalf and follow him around the field. I don't know.
I was wrong about that. Juan Castillo in the comments corrected me. It was only about 25 routes, so I apologize about that. 25 routes, and he only gave up 63 yards on 4 catches.
Okay, so assuming they do the same thing this week, then we'll see how he does against those big play Cardinals receivers. That's why I'm saying this week was such a stepping stone, the Seahawks game. It showed you what the Bills can be if both offense and defense are playing well on the same week, and they hadn't had that so far this year. They didn't even really have that last year because the Bills' offense was so consistently blah all of last season. They were so consistently mediocre while the defense was playing well. And so this might be the first time in 2 seasons, correct me if I'm wrong, in the last 2 seasons, this was the first time that the Bills offense and defense had significantly good days in the same week.
I sat right here on this podcast and I have harped this team of the fact that they cannot have a complete performance to save their lives. And it's been discouraging, a whole season and a half, essentially, of football of that variety where, you have the talent on paper, you have the capabilities on paper to be the team that you're designed to be, and you just aren't. And maybe that wasn't the case as much last year as it was the first 8 games this year, but it's definitely discouraging to see that and to watch the culmination of this team, to watch them, learn as the season goes on, to watch them grow on the defensive side of the ball to the point where they stop. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say stop, but they halt the Seahawks in the first half in order to give the offense a manageable lead to the point where you can just start sending pressure because they're just going to be throwing themselves out of the hole for the remainder of the game. You saw a complete performance for this Bills team. And with that, let's get into studs and duds. Jeff, give me one of your studs for this week's performance.
My first stud's Tremaine Edmunds, and I think that he earned it from me because I've been very critical of him this year, and that I've thought that up to this game, I didn't think he got any better from last year. He had a really nice game. I've already said it tonight. He filled the holes. He made some nice tackles on Seattle running backs, and I thought that the linebacking core as a whole did a good job in this game. So Trey Edmunds is my first stud.
I hate it when you and I are both consensus on things. I feel like it's boring.
I thought you were going to say AJ Klein.
What are you talking about? You think you're going to say AJ Klein? Come on. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm just poking fun. You said a defensive player, so I'll start with an offensive player. I'm going to go with Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, I was looking at his stats today, and I'd actually had a post on the Cold Front Report, and, apologies that I'm one of the most unprepared podcasters that you will find, and I don't have it lined up in my various pictures and whatnot, but he has matched his reception total that he had all of 2019 in just 9 games with the Bills, and he has about 300 yards less receiving, 3 less touchdowns, and 3 less targets in just 9 games. This is a guy who has completely changed this Bills offense. You know, you see it with the ability of John Brown being able to just go off for a handful of catches and 99 yards. And then, you know, Gabe Davis, here's his 4 receptions for 70 yards. You know, the addition of Stephon Diggs trickles down through the whole Bills offense, and the ability to have adequate production from all of your other receivers, from all of your other playmakers, not to mention, you know, the guy also leads the league in receptions and receiving yards. Stephon Diggs has been one of the best, not just receivers in the AFC, not just receivers in the AFC East, one of the best receivers in the entire NFL the first 9 games of his Buffalo Bills career. And, you know, 9 games into this trade, it looks like the Bills took the money and ran. And, you know, I couldn't be happier. Stephon Diggs on a weekly basis is a factor for this Bills offense. So with that, do you have a second stud, or you roll with one?
We'll leave it at that.
Leave it at that. Okay. So do you have a dud? Do you have a dud?
I mean, I have one dud play. That was the deep ball to David Moore or whoever. Somebody blew that coverage. But
that was Teron Johnson.
Johnson, he even sprinted. I don't know if they were in zone on that or if that was just his man, but he was frantically sprinting toward the end zone because the ball was in the air and he was nowhere near the receiver. But yeah,
it was just wow. That was.
I do want to hear your dud though, if you have one.
I don't see. That's the thing, is I feel really bad because I feel like I'm the most negative person on your screen on more weeks than not, and I don't really have a dud other than Teron Johnson and that blown coverage. Someone mentioned it in the comments too, and you know that's what it reminded. It was Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf was always clutch. It reminded me of things in the comments. Teron Johnson, you know, he's always good for one blown coverage a game. And maybe you can enter the rest of the games this season with some optimism, given that Daryl Worley is probably going to be active going forward.
Yeah, well, I did want to say one more thing before we start talking about the Arizona game. So I said this maybe the third Bills drive, and one of the Fox announcers said it like 5 minutes after I did. His name escapes me, and for that I apologize. But the way the Bills were attacking the Seattle defense looked like a Tom Brady New England Patriots offense. Yes, they could throw the ball downfield if they wanted to, but they were picking them apart with short passes to a bunch of different receivers, and they had screens set up, and it was just like they could not stop Buffalo. The Seattle defense just couldn't stop them. It was one thing after the other of receivers open and Allen not really having to make that tough of throws because guys are open. And it's not just Diggs. It's not just Brown. It's Beasley. It's your tight ends. And Stephon Diggs, he's always there when you need him to be. He's shown us that this season. But they really spread the ball around a lot, especially in the first half. And it really reminded me of a Brady-led Patriots offense of just no matter what looks the defense is throwing at you, they just can't stop you. And what a beautiful thing that was if you're a Bills fan.
See, I'm really glad you brought this up because I feel like in every one of these games where we're talking about Josh Allen having a really good performance, I feel like we're also in the same time talking about him distributing the football throughout the game very well, very efficiently. And that has been a consistent theme in these good games for the Bills passing attack, where Josh Allen is finding 6, 7, 8, 9 different receivers through the game. And that's a lot for a defense to have to account for, let alone when you're reeling as it is with a defense such as the Seattle Seahawks. That's extremely difficult. But Josh Allen, not really being too picky who he's throwing the ball to, opening up the offense. Because that was one thing that I was partially afraid of getting a guy like Stephon Diggs, was Josh Allen just solely focusing on Stephon Diggs, forcing the ball to him in situations where he shouldn't, and not taking the easy plays when he should. And to see him grow, don't get me wrong, I feel like if you got Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs in 2018, that's the player you'd be watching on a weekly basis, is a guy trying to force the ball to his best player every single play. But now, since he's matured as a football player, as he's matured as a quarterback, you're seeing him go through his progressions. You're seeing him look to guys like Isaiah McKenzie for the first touchdown of the game. You see him just distributing the ball, finding Tyler Croft for another red zone touchdown in this game. He's not afraid to share the sugar on this offense. He's not afraid to. We've seen, I feel like a conversation going into this season was certainly, there's so many mouths to feed, who was going to really go hungry. And really the running game's what's gone hungry for the majority of the season, aside from that New England performance. But it's been with success more times than not. This Bills passing offense is efficient. This Bills passing offense is potent. And I think both of those things can be attributed to the addition of Stephon Diggs. But like you mentioned, Jeff, it's not just Diggs. It's not just Beasley. It's not just John Brown. It's the accumulation of all of those players, the culmination of all of those players, all being on the same team, on the same field at the same time, and leaving so many options for this Bills quarterback to make plays on a weekly basis. So it's definitely
– yeah, and they're going to need him.
Do I have a lag?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You can go ahead.
But anyways, I was saying they're going to need him this coming week against the Cardinals, because that's a damn good offense that you're playing against.
Yeah. You're definitely going to need to keep all of your options available this week against the Cardinals. It's not just a really good offense; it's also a really good defense. But let's start with that offense. The Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury led offense for the Arizona Cardinals, first in the league in yards. And let's talk about Kyler Murray for a second. Kyler Murray, who also had his hat in that MVP conversation through the first month of the season, he's gone through his fair share of ups and downs throughout this year. And the Cardinals got them their own number one wide receiver for their young quarterback to develop in DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins, similar to Stephon Diggs, there's little to no drop off from his play from his former team to his new team, and he has seamlessly walked into the building and gelled with this young quarterback. Just from a broad perspective, Jeff, what is it really are you looking for this Bills team to do to potentially stop this Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins connection? And you also have to factor in Kyler Murray's mobility, as he's one of the most incredible athletes at the quarterback position that you'll find throughout the league.
Yeah, well, I think the Bills are going to have to do something similar to what they did this week against Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. We know about Kyler Murray's playmaking ability, how good he is when he gets out into space, and he's a dual threat quarterback, obviously. However, we've talked tonight about how the Bills linebacking core stepped up and really helped out their secondary. And so the defensive line, they were finally getting some pressure on the quarterback, and I think it really helped the defense as a unit. So you're going to have to do that again. You're going to need a big game out of your front seven if your secondary is going to be able to contain those Arizona receivers. You can't rely on, you giving Kyler Murray time to throw the ball. You can't rely on your safeties and your corners to be able to shut them down for the whole game. This offense who is scoring 29 points a game, over 29 points a game, that's really impressive. And as you said, they're first in the league in yards. So I think that it starts with your front seven if you're stopping their aerial attack.
Yeah. And man, I feel like a broken record whenever I bring this up. But last week's just another example of it throughout the Sean McDermott tenure here in Buffalo. Mobile quarterbacks do not play well against this defense. They never have. They never do, and I'm not betting on them really ever having a whoa performance against the Bills defense. I mean, that obviously it'll be different if the personnel were worse, but this Bills defense, I don't think you're going to see a drop-off performance against a Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury led football team against this Bills defense. I know that might be crazy to say, considering this is the best offense statistically in the league right now. Putting up 29 points per game is insane. The amount, I think they're putting up 422 yards per game, which is insane. That's first in the league. This is statistically the best offense in the NFL. And I wouldn't be as confident saying that they could contain an offense like this if I had not seen it the week before. You can say what you will about Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray differing as football players. The one thing they both have in common is that they are athletic and they're not afraid and they're not they're good at throwing the ball from out of the pocket and while on the move. Both of those players are good at that. Both of those players have more than one primary target that they can throw the ball to. Last week you saw Russell, who has David Moore, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf, and now in this game you're going up against 4 wide receivers with DeAndre Hopkins, Andy Isabella, Christian Kirk, and Larry Fitzgerald, who's still miraculously playing football the stage of his career. But if you look at how this Arizona Cardinals offense is built, it's very similar to the Russell Wilson Seattle Seahawks led offense. And does that play into the Bills' favor? I believe so, slightly. I believe it also plays into the Bills' favor that they tend to have their best games against mobile quarterbacks. Just something about Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, when they face mobile quarterbacks, a lot of it has to do with Sean McDermott really having to practice against mobile quarterbacks throughout his whole coaching career, with Donovan McNabb and then Cam Newton. And, now he has Josh Allen in practice every single day. I believe he also had Michael Vick there for a time in Philly as well. But the point being, Sean McDermott has plenty of experience practicing against mobile quarterbacks. It almost feels like, that's his comfort zone as a defensive coordinator or as a defensive coach. So I'm actually I'm almost borderline overly confident going into this game for this Bills defense facing up against Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins and company.
I disagree with you. I think it's going to be really hard to put that together 2 weeks in a row after how well you played against Russell Wilson. I mean, it's Russell freaking Wilson, one of the best players in the league, might be the MVP of the league right now until the Bills got to him then, of course. But I think it's going to be really difficult to do 2 weeks in a row. And until the Bills show me that they can do that 2 weeks in a row, this Bills defense that has struggled against almost everybody, I'm just not going to believe it. I'm just not going to believe that you're going to go down there on a West Coast trip and the week after Arizona. So they have their bye week 2 weeks ago. They come out, they lose in a shootout to the Dolphins. They're hurting right now. They're fired up and they're at home. The Bills got to fly into Sky Harbor and play in Glendale. And I don't know. I'm very apprehensive because it's tough. It's going to be tough to do that 2 weeks in a row. And maybe the Bills can, but I'm not going to bank on this defense that we saw this year, shutting down 2 offenses like this 2 weeks in a row. Now, will Josh Allen be able to overcome it? Maybe, but I'm not going to bank on the Bills shutting down the Arizona offense.
I understand the skepticism. I get it. I'm not going to put you on the burner for not banking on this Bills defense because I feel like every single time they don't have a halfway decent performance necessarily. Just like I remember it was the Raiders game. They had a good half. The second half was a good half, and I said this is it. And then they come out there and lay an egg against the Titans, and it's just maybe I'm looking for some sort of light that this defense is going to some way, shape, or form refine the form that they had of the past. But last week it was an example of that. You're right. It's going to be difficult for this defense to string together 2 successful games right in a row against 2 elite offenses, 2 top 3 offenses in this league. This is a huge game. And Justin Canellis mentions it in the comments. Hopkins shred in last year in the playoff game in the second half when we laid off, and I have to mention it. Tre'Davious White lining up against DeAndre Hopkins in this game. That first half of that playoff game, I remember it very vividly. Trey White held DeAndre Hopkins, I believe catchless. Catchless and borderline yardless. And then in the second half, DeAndre Hopkins came right back and he had a day. He had a half. It wasn't a huge day, but it was a really good half of football for DeAndre Hopkins. That is a matchup that I cannot wait to see. Because I believe this is either the 3rd or 4th time that Trey White would be matched up with DeAndre Hopkins in his career, and it is always a popcorn fest when these 2 match up. It is it's a dogfight, and I'm going to be interested to see if next week I'm going to be saying something similar to the fact that Trey just got beat on a really good ball in this situation by DeAndre Hopkins. Part of me feels like it's a little personal for Trey White going up against DeAndre Hopkins. He's really the only elite receiver that he's had to face off with any kind of consistency in his career. He's only seen DK Metcalf as a baby in this league compared to DeAndre Hopkins. But DeAndre Hopkins is definitely one of the, I believe, one of the 2 best wide receivers in football, not just right now, but over the past 3 or 4 years. He's been one of the 2 or 3 best wide receivers in football. And, I'm quite intrigued to not only see what this Bills defense does to try and not only contain DeAndre Hopkins, but the other receiving threats. But I'm intrigued to see how Trey White performs against a player that we've seen him struggle against in the past, but also have success with in the past.
Yeah, like I said, I think that their ability to slow down the Arizona passing game starts with your linebackers, and it starts with your ability to put pressure on Murray. I mean, obviously he can beat you with his legs, but make him. Don't let him stand in the pocket and throw the ball all over your defense, because, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. And I think that the one word that I want to see from the Bills defense after this Seattle game is continuity. You mentioned the second half in the game before they played Tennessee had some positive things, and they came out, and obviously it didn't go the way they wanted. We need continuity if we're going to start talking about this Bills defense in a different light than we have all year, and that what's wrong. If we're going to be saying, here's what's getting better instead of here's what's wrong, they need to come out and do it again this week.
I want to switch gear. Well, one thing about that Cardinals offensive line is there is room for there will be plenty of opportunities for this Bills defensive line to have success. So I understand the reservations of the Bills defense that you have of whether or not they'll be able to string together 2 successful performances against 2 elite offenses. That is more than reasonable. But this offensive line isn't necessarily one of the better ones in football. They have a lot of just guys on that in that unit between Humphreys, Pugh, Cole, Murray, and Beecham. So there will be opportunities for this Bills defensive line to make plays. Like I had said earlier, the biggest thing for this Bills defense or the Bills defensive line, and that, as a matter of fact, is gap integrity, is staying in your rush lanes, is maintaining your responsibility, because that is really where these mobile quarterbacks beat football teams, is where people overplay the football, over pursue the football, try and do more than their job entails, and they get out of their gap. They abandon their responsibility trying to fulfill someone else's, and that's bread and butter. That's what these mobile quarterbacks and these offenses ran by mobile quarterbacks want you to do. They want you to get undisciplined. Shifting gears to their defense. What part of their what is the first thing you notice about this Cardinals defense, which is also, I mean, they're not top tier, but they're middle of the pack of sorts in all categories. What are your initial thoughts on we're going up against this Cardinals defense?
I mean, I'd noticed Jordan Phillips right away. He's going to be playing inspired this week. I'm not afraid of Jordan Phillips. I wouldn't say that he's going to be your X factor for the Cardinals defense, but he's definitely going to be played inspired after, the Bills didn't bring him back. And I noticed the secondary. I mean, Patrick Peterson has for a long time been a great player in this league. I like Budda Baker, Kirkpatrick, and they've got some good players back there. And I think it's going to be tougher sledding for Josh Allen this week than it was the week before. I mean, obviously, when you're playing the 32nd ranked pass defense like you did in the Seahawks, that's going to be about as easy as it gets. But it's going to be tougher. It's going to be tougher this week. But that's not to say that Allen can't do it and can't come out and have another big game. But, those guys in the back, like Patrick Peterson is a tremendous player. Their safeties are good. They're ball hawks. And I think that Allen's going to have to be careful where he throws the ball this week, or else he might be looking at some turnovers.
The one thing this Arizona defense has in common, I feel like, with the Seahawks is their athleticism in the second level with their linebackers. You talk about players like Devondre Campbell, Jordan Hicks, and, of course, Isaiah Simmons. Those are 3 animals in the middle of that defense that are fast, athletic. Isaiah Simmons, oh my gosh, that kid's going to be incredible. He's going to be one of the best players in football in a matter of time. And you touched on Drake Kirkpatrick, who I believe is questionable coming into this game. Budda Baker, who's been one of the best defensive backs in football throughout the last season and a half, and also Patrick Peterson, who continues to do his thing. facing up against this defense, they're athletic. They really are. And athleticism, oftentimes you have to give up in size what you get with athleticism. And there are times where I feel like that plays to the benefit of the Bills offense, and that plays against the strengths of the Bills offense. This is an occasion where I believe, I hate doing it. I hate getting on the podcast saying you need to run the ball, because I feel like we say it every single week. I feel like we say it no matter what the matchup is. But this is a game where I said going into the Seattle game, you need to have a balanced approach if you were going to beat the Seahawks. But I did not expect the Seahawks to be just sliced through like a hot knife going through butter last week by Josh Allen in this passing attack. But I feel like with the athleticism on that defense for the Arizona Cardinals in comparison to the Seahawks, I feel like with those solid players on the back end with Budda Baker and Patrick Peterson, you need to have a balanced approach, especially if they get Dre Kirkpatrick back. Dre Kirkpatrick, he's okay. He's a moderate player in this league. I wouldn't say he was a successful first-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously, since he's on a new team. But you'll have your opportunities in this game. If Dre Kirkpatrick is out of this game and they're down to their what is their fourth or fifth corner with wow, goodness, they have a lot of injuries. I will say that they do have a lot of injuries in their secondary. But you will have opportunities with players like Cole Beasley and John Brown in this game if Dre Kirkpatrick were to miss this game. But ultimately, I believe you need to run the football with Moss and Motor in this football game. I think this is going to be a game, not really, I wouldn't say to the effect of a Patriots type game plan, but I would say a more balanced approach. I'm expecting maybe 9 to 11 carries for each of those running backs. And if they do that, I think this will be a successful day for this Bills offense as they play. They have the best play action quarterback in football with Josh Allen statistically in every category. So I think that this Bills offense, there are opportunities for success in this game, and I believe that hinges with a solid rushing approach.
Yeah, and Zach Moss got an increased number of carries this past week, which is encouraging because it means that the Bills are trusting both Moss and Singletary to, have a pretty heavy workload, and it keeps both of them fresh as well. And they can both do it out of the backfield. I mean, both Moss and Singletary have shown that they can catch passes and make plays in open space, and they've also both run hard. I mean, obviously we've said that before, but they both are always going forward at the end of the run, and they're always factors because when you have a passing game that's so good like the Bills do, your running backs can really add to it that much. I mean, I said that I thought the Bills looked like a New England style, your classic New England style offense on Sunday where they were throwing the ball short and picking it apart. And we know how New England always has a host of running backs, a running back by committee. If you'll say that they can get the ball to out of the backfield, they can run screens to them, they can run out routes out of the backfield. And I think that if that's something the Bills offense can do, not saying that you need to become the old school Patriots, but if that's something that you can do, you become really dangerous week in and week out. But I really just think this game's going to come down to if the Bills defense can continue to play like it did against the Seahawks and get those turnovers.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think if they can force a young quarterback into making mistakes, anything comparable to what they did to Russell Wilson last week, if they continue to manufacture pressure with very creative blitz looks, situational blitz looks, I don't know, Jeff. I don't know. That Seahawks game really could be. I understand they're coming. They were going to that game with 2 consecutive wins, and they're on 3 right now. But that Seahawks game really could be the start of something for this Bills defense, the start of that something that I've been talking about since probably about the second or third week. And that would be a huge revelation for this Bills defense, considering, I understand we didn't record a pod last week, but I was extremely harsh on this team for not making a move at the deadline. And to have a defensive resurgence like that in the second half of the year. I mean, it starts with these first 2 games. You did it against the Seahawks. I'm hopeful to see. I'm expecting to see something of that variety against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. it would be huge for this team. It would be huge for confidence in the locker room. It'd be huge for confidence in the personnel of the most expensive defensive line in football. I mean, you can say what you will about their lack of pressure with sending forward, but if they have found the answer to those defensive woes, then hey, I'm all for it. I don't want to get out of here without talking about both linebacker Darren Lee and cornerback Daryl Worley, who the Bills signed last week. They did not activate for last week's game. Do you have any general thoughts about both of these players? I'm more of a fan of the Worley addition. I think that is going to make a bigger difference. But I am on record saying that Darren Lee could revitalize his career with the Buffalo Bills after sputtering out of New York and getting traded to the Chiefs, and then being relegated to being a special teams contributor for the Super Bowl champion Chiefs last year. I think Darren Lee has one hell of an opportunity to take some snaps away from A.J. Klein in the absence of Matt Milano while he heals up on IR. And I feel like Daryl Worley has a very comparable chance taking over for Teron Johnson in the nickel cornerback role. Now, what are your general thoughts about both of these players before we get out of here?
I think Daryl Worley can come in and eat up some snaps, and that's a big thing on your secondary, keeping those guys fresh. And also, apart from Trey White, your corners and your nickels, you don't really have any go-to guys. You don't have guys who are, say, this is our CB2, and I've talked about this before with, rotating guys, cornerback by committee, whatever. I think he's a guy who can come in and play snaps, and he doesn't need to set the world on fire, obviously. I mean, he's a mid-season acquisition, but if he can come in and play some quality snaps, it makes your secondary that much better. And it rubs off on everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. I think the addition of Daryl Worley could be huge. I hope to see Darren Lee a lot more than first off, we gotta get him active. And there's a chance that this Darren Lee addition could just be for quality depth at this point in the season. But I feel like if he gets a fair opportunity in this Bills defense, then he has a very fair chance of revitalizing his career and potentially earning another contract when he leaves Buffalo. With that, let's get into our predictions for this matchup. The Bills heading on to the West Coast for the second time this season, the first time in a month. Jeff, who's winning this game? What's the score? What's the reasoning? What do you got?
Well, that might have foreshadowed my pick a little bit, but I really think that I don't trust the Buffalo defense to come out back-to-back weeks and play that well against these quality offenses. I mean, if you're coming out and playing a lesser quality offense this week, then maybe I'd feel differently, and maybe I think that you can use the Seattle game as some momentum. But unless the Bills defense comes out and proves me wrong, unless they come out and they get more timely turnovers and they can slow down Kyler Murray and the great weapons that he has, I just don't feel confident saying that Buffalo is going to win this game. Not until the Bills defense shows me that it can be what it was last year and that it can do that back-to-back weeks. I think Josh Allen will have a fine game. I think that he'll continue to produce. He's in the dome, so weather's not going to be a factor. But I think that Kyler Murray is going to be too much, and I think that we're going to learn a lot about what the Buffalo defense is, whether it plays well or whether it doesn't. The Cardinals win this game 31-23.
Wow. We are, Jeff, you and
I can say it with a straight face too.
So, what are you making fun of me already? Because I started smiling?
No. I'm just I wouldn't fault you for picking Buffalo. I wouldn't fault anybody for picking Buffalo, but I feel like the Seahawks game was perfect. It could not have gone better for the Bills. I mean, they were just unstoppable on offense. I don't know. It almost seems like that was too much happiness for Bills fans, and so it's going to come back down to earth this week.
Damn it! Come on, don't
I'm
say
a realist,
that.
my friend.
No, that's not realist. That's defeatist. Come on,
don't.
No, coming back to earth.
Come on, I mean that they're going to play that well 2 weeks in a row to we're going to beat these two teams.
I'm going to say they are. And I am as confident in the Bills performing in this game as you are that they won't perform. That's how confident I am. Like I said, I am borderline overconfident going into this game. And it's not necessarily because of the Seahawks. I've been confident in their matchup with the Arizona Cardinals before the Seahawks. I was thinking, oh, Jesus, get the Seahawks out of the way so we can just play the Cardinals. And I understand I might be overlooking them a little bit, but I'm not on the football team and I can do things like that. But the point is, with the Arizona Cardinals, you think Kyler Murray is going to be too much for the Bills defense, whereas I think the Bills defense is going to be too much for Kyler Murray, simply in the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, this defense is in its comfort zone when playing against mobile quarterbacks, when playing against athletic quarterbacks who like to move, who like to evade, who like to improvise. That's really where this defense is in its comfort zone. And, you know, I really feel like this is an opportunity for this Bills defense to force Kyler Murray into a lot of mental mistakes, for these two veteran safeties to really play a lot of mind games at the line of scrimmage and pre-snap with a young quarterback. It's really an opportunity for this Bills defense. You know, like you mentioned, they have yet to have consecutive solid performances this season. And this would be the first opportunity they've had all year to have a solid consecutive performance. I really think this is the game it happens. I'm not scared of that Cardinals defense at all. I'm not going to sit here and say they're flukes. They're a good defense. They're just not as good as a lot of people are kicking them up to be. I feel like if Drake Kirkpatrick isn't in this game, that whole defense is different. Budda Baker is one solid playmaker, but he is just one playmaker. I saw one playmaker. I understand it's different. Budda Baker is 10 times the player Jamal Adams is in coverage, but I saw one playmaker on the Seattle Seahawks defense be just turned into nothing last week, and it was irrelevant on that side of the ball almost, aside from his one sack. But I'm going to say the Bills are going to win this game. For a score, I don't know. I'm going to say 36-27 Bills. That's what I'm going to go with.
Okay.
So we need to have some differences here, because I need to catch up at some point. And, you know, I don't know. I forget what the points are right now. I believe I'm still 7 or 6 points out of the lead or out of tie. And we'll get into these other divisional games here in just a second. But go ahead. What were you saying? So
what I'm looking for this week is another good performance by the Bills defense. But why do I think it's not going to happen? Because it's week 10. It's week 10, and we've watched this defense play for over half the season now, and they haven't done that. It wouldn't surprise me if this game's higher scoring. If it was a 38-31, that wouldn't surprise me, because I think that Josh Allen is very well going to go down there and play well again. But I just don't. I don't know. I don't see it happening. I hope that I'm wrong, and I think that if the Buffalo defense comes out and shows us this week that that's who it was in the Seattle game, we got a long way to go this season. We could be playing into the end of January, but I'm not confident that that's going to happen. And until it does, I just don't think that the Buffalo defense is going to shut down playmakers like this 2 weeks. I said this 20 minutes ago. I think Arizona's probably pissed. Dolphins aren't a bad team, but they just lost to the Dolphins. That's a game you probably pencil in as a W if you're Arizona, especially at home. And now you lose that game, and here we are. And I don't know. We'll see. The Bills, this is their last game before their bye week, so that's another thing to think about. You obviously want to win going into your bye. It makes it that much sweeter, but West Coast trip, team you're playing against is motivated. You got Jordan Phillips on the other side of the ball. He's going to play motivated. Not that he's going to be, I don't know if he's going to be a big difference maker, but he's played well. It just doesn't seem like an ideal game for the Bills, especially how well they played against the Seahawks. But we'll see.
That's one thing I can't wait to come away from this game saying is when everybody shuts up about Jordan Phillips. I'm not saying you're not one of those people, Jeff. I'm not saying you're one of those people. And if I implied that you were, I'm sorry, but you're not. Jordan Phillips was not a huge playmaker for this team. And, you know, the 1 week the Bills run defense, I think it was the week of the Titans game, or not the Titans, the Chiefs game. And Jordan Phillips had a big game, I believe, on Sunday Night Football or the week before or something. It was the same weekend it lined up. And it was the first time Jordan Phillips had shown up to play all season after getting a $10 million contract or making $10 million per season in Arizona. It was the first time he showed up all season, just so happened to be on national TV when everyone's watching and people are like, oh, look, we should have signed Jordan Phillips. No, we should not have signed Jordan Phillips to $10 million per season. The guy has not been a difference maker this season at all for that defense. And if this team were paying $10 million to Jordan Phillips, I'd be more pissed that they were doing that than I was all of last year when they were paying Star Lotulelei $11 million. And if you recall our conversations from the first season of the Overtime podcast, you know that I am not a big fan, or I wasn't a big fan of Star Lotulelei. Obviously, I've changed my tune given how this defense looks without him. But Jordan Phillips is not the missing piece on this defense. And I think regardless of what the Bills do successfully on the offensive side of the ball, I think that is the one narrative we're going to walk away from this game with, is that, oh man, maybe the Bills made the right decision about Jordan Phillips. Maybe that was the right move. I think Mongo is going to have a handful of Jordan Phillips this week, and I don't think it's going to be close. I think Mongo has all of the advantage in this game.
All I'm saying is that Jordan Phillips is going to be pissed off. I don't think he's that good of a player. I'm not saying that he's going to do much, but he's going to be pissed off. Yeah, and also to everybody in the comments saying that the Bills are going to beat the Cardinals because Miami beat them. The transitive property doesn't apply to the NFL. We know that.
Ooh, transitive property.
Any given Sunday.
Any given Sunday, Jeff. Well,
we'll see.
We have two more games to get into.
If the Bills come out and shut down Kyler Murray, please grill me next week.
Oh, I have no problem grilling it, because then I'd gain some sort of ground in our picks too. So
it's not like I'm going to go into the game rooting for the Bills to get crushed, because that's just what I want us to be right.
It's all right. I was in your shoes last week going on the Seahawks, so hopefully you feel just as wrong next week as I do right now. But we have two more games we have to get into real quick. The Los Angeles Chargers visiting the Miami Dolphins. Jeff, who do you got as the Chargers play the Dolphins?
This is an interesting game. I mean, it's Herbert versus Tua. That's good TV, right? It's good TV. I think that the Chargers, they just lose games at the end. They just, for some reason, but I think they're going to pull it out this week. The Dolphins are a good team. They're a good team. Tua played well. I disagreed with the decision to bench Fitzpatrick in favor of Tua simply because I didn't think Fitzpatrick had done anything to deserve that. But I think the Chargers pull one out this week in a close game, say 24-23.
I'm taking the Dolphins winning it 31-27. I really want to see the Chargers win this game, but like you said, they always find a way to lose these close contests. And one contest that I don't think is going to be close, I want to know what you're thinking about it. Baltimore Ravens visiting the New England Patriots. Who you got? What's the score?
I have the Ravens. Obviously, I mean, the Patriots showed us last night what they were. But the Jets, they played well. I don't know. I feel weird saying that, but their receivers are solid. Joe Flacco played all right, but more than anything, the Patriots showed us last night that they're not a contender. They're not even a pretender. They're limping to 3-5. They're going to get beat up bad by Lamar Jackson, who, despite he's been struggling, I think that he'll have no problem getting by. The Ravens will win this game 33-16.
Okay. All right. You and I are pretty close with our scores. We got some prices right going on here. I got the Ravens winning 38-13. Same points that you just made. That's one of the worst run defenses in football. And I think Lamar Jackson's going to regain his footing against, the New England Patriots. And I have no problem watching it. I'll sit here and dispute Lamar Jackson all day long, but I think he's going to tear up this Patriots defense, and we'll see. You have the Chargers winning, I have the Dolphins winning, and we both have the Ravens blowing out the Patriots. So we'll see how this week goes out. We'll be right here again live on the Cold Front Report Facebook page, YouTube page, and Twitter account on the usual time, 8 p.m. next Tuesday. Jeff, before we get out of here, tell the people where they can find you and what they have to look forward to when they do.
You can find me on Twitter at RealJUVEINO, like it says below my head right here. We got lots of cool stuff from St. Bonaventure Athletics, college basketball starting up soon. It's high school sports playoff time in Western New York if you're into that, and a lot of cool stuff hopefully coming from my way. So I would appreciate your guys' follow, and thank you everybody for watching tonight. This was a great show.
Oh yeah, it's always fun. Be sure to go follow the Cold Front Report on Twitter, Instagram, and like our Facebook page. That's at Cold Front Report on Twitter, Cold Front Report _Bills News on Instagram, Cold Front Report Buffalo Bills News on Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we also have a brand new state-of-the-art web page that is going to be debuting Friday morning guys, I don't like talking about my own things. I really don't. I'm going to be a critic far more than I am going to praise things. But this webpage, it's some next level stuff. It's some stuff that you guys aren't going to want to miss out on. So it's launching Friday morning around 9 a.m. or so, I believe. Regardless, be sure to check out the Cold Front Report web page. That's coldfrontreport.com for all of the blogs and articles. And Jeff and I will start producing our articles. John Spiracco, Brandon Koch, Brandon Sturmer. Plenty of content to be found on the Cold Front Report webpage that is going to be rebuilt and going to be finished. I've seen it a couple times. It's some crazy stuff, guys. It's some next level stuff. You're not going to want to miss it. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, it's at CFR Clayton. And on Instagram, it's the same exact handle, at CFR CLAYTON. Thank you all for tuning in, listening, watching. If you'd like to find, be sure to tune in next week, 8 p.m., same place, same time. Be sure to tune in to the Pressure Front podcast on Thursday night at 8:30 now instead of 9:30. 8:30, Jamie Turner Montgomery goes live with Lorenzo Alexander. I'll be going live on Saturday with Mario Granada and Mookie Hawkins for the Saturday night tailgate. Who knows who Mookie's bringing in, but there's plenty of content to be found here on the Cold Front Report, so be sure to stay tuned and follow us on all pages. And hey, thank you all for tuning in, and this has been the Overtime Podcast presented by the Cold Front Report.